Welcome to another episode of the International Trumpet Guild podcast. For more information or to become a member, please visit trumpetguild.org.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the International Trumpet Guild official podcast. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our guest. She holds a Bachelor of Music in Trumpet Performance from James Madison University, a Master's in Music in Trumpet Performance from the University of Southern California, and she is a current doctoral student in Trumpet Performance and Pedagogy at the University of Colorado Boulder, where she studies with Dr. Ryan Gardner. As an educator, she holds a private studio teaching trumpeters of all ages and levels. She is the high brass teaching staff with the Music City Drum Corps in Nashville, and she's also a graduate assistant with CU Boulder's athletic bands. As a performer, she has played with the Civic Orchestra of Los Angeles, Opera Colorado, the Colorado Springs Philharmonic, Athena Brass Band, Chromatic Brass Collective, and many others. And as a competitor, she has won first place in the National Trumpet Competition with her small ensemble from USC back in 2023. And this past year in 2025, she won the International Women's Brass Conference Mock Military Band Audition and the ITG Wind Band Excerpts Competition. So yes, without further ado, welcome Amy.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Jasmine.
Of course, I'm so excited to chat with you. Part of our podcast is like kind of interviewing people of all sorts of different places. So we have people that are going to be coming on that are composers, orchestral players, commercial players, and we also really want to like hold a space for emerging professionals because we want to blend the lines of like these people are like on like the pedestal people and like just make everyone kind of join into one community. And so yeah, one of the first people I thought of was you.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So just to start her off, when did you first learn about ITG?
Yeah, I first learned about ITG when I was in my undergrad at James Madison University. I remember becoming a member of ITG so that we could maintain our status as like an ITG affiliate chapter. And then in that same year, we also took the steps to become a registered student organization on campus. So I would say that that was my first introduction. But, before going to college, I had never heard of ITG or any of like the big brass organizations. And it wasn't until 2023 that I attended my first ITG conference.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And you volunteered at that conference as well?
I didn't. So the very first one I attended was as a competitor, and then the last two, 2024 and 2025, I've attended as a volunteer, and then this past year, volunteer and a competitor.
How is it like different being a volunteer versus being a competitor? Like, how has that experience been?
I think both give you the opportunity to meet a lot of really cool people, but in my experience with volunteering, you're just way more hands-on involved. And I personally really enjoy getting involved in organizations and getting to see how things kind of work behind the scenes. And so being a volunteer at ITG, you get to do that. I would honestly recommend it to any student. It's a really good way to also attend the conference. There's plenty of time for you to work your shifts and to go to all of the amazing sessions and concerts. You get to meet so many incredible people, and like I've met lifelong friends. It's been a really great opportunity.
That's amazing. What would you say is like your all-time favorite memory of ITG?
Ooh, I think just, getting to meet and work with all the different people who are attending, but also just all the behind the scenes like moments where you're with the other volunteers and you're laughing and maybe you're sharing stories about, your experiences or just sort of general life. Those are the memories that definitely sort of stay true to me.
That's awesome. That's so nice. Are you going this year?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm still sort of working out my schedule for sure.
That's so fair. So as a competitor, what kind of approach do you take, like as you're coming closer to the competitions or even like with auditions and stuff? What's your mental, physical game?
Yeah, as I've competed a bunch, and I've sort of tried to hone in on what works best for me. I think as I get closer, like a month or so out, my goal is to be going through the motions, whether that's in the practice room by myself or playing mocks in lessons or for people who aren't necessarily just like in school with me. I've called friends before and done mocks over Zoom and over FaceTime. And I think that those situations kind of serve as like a small just version of what it's going to feel like to play for people. Because playing by yourself in the practice room is one thing, and being able to read a list down or play your solo from top to bottom is really important. But simulating some of those nerves of someone sitting there and watching you is really, really important.
For sure. Do you find like you get a lot of performance anxiety in those settings, like in competition and auditions?
I think in, the times where I've done a ton of mocks beforehand, I do get nervous. Everyone gets nervous, but I think that like I'm able to ground myself in knowing like I've run this list this many times, I've played for this many people. And for me, that sort of helps me like remember like what do those nerves feel like? You know how to play through those nerves. And one of the things that was the most helpful recently was like seek out playing for people who make you nervous. Like if playing for all of your ensemble directors is going to make you nervous, you should do that because they're there to help you.
That's a really, really good piece of advice. Do you typically, like when you do a mock audition, do you have people like give you feedback? Do they write it down? Do you just like verbal feedback, or is it mostly just to like have that setting?
I definitely am always looking for feedback. I think as I get closer, like if it's like a day or two before I'm about to leave for a competition or something, I think that like both parties are aware of like the timing that's, sort of at play. And so if there are small things like, oh, you're rushing here, or maybe watch how your sound is carrying in this measure, those can be helpful. But I do think it's okay when you're playing mocks, especially in preparation for something like a competition, to know when you want like very specific feedback versus like just playing to get like the nerves out.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. So in terms of other groups that you've played with, how long have you been playing with the Athena Brass Band?
I love Athena. I first was invited to play with them in 2022 at the International Women's Brass Conference that was at UNT. And typically for those IWBC performances that the group does, they try to bring in new people. And so I was very lucky to be asked. And since then, I've played a handful of other times and at various conferences. Some were just sort of like concerts. Like we played in Kentucky a couple of years ago, and that was just for the community. But yeah, I've had a really great time playing with Athena, and I have played in brass band for a while. That was something that I did in college, and it was very fulfilling and like a highlight of my time at JMU. And so it's been really great to have another outlet since leaving.
That's awesome. And you joined them for when they went to Manchester last year?
I did.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was incredible. That was really cool. Yeah, I think that, I had seen a couple of the European brass bands at various things. One of them came and toured in the US a couple of years ago, but it was so cool to just see all of like the top brass bands in one place and get to hear like some really great cornet and flugelhorn playing.
That's so awesome. That's amazing. And you're currently a board member now, right? As of
I am, yeah.
newest election. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
What are some of your tasks that you do on the board?
So far, it's, we had meetings just to sort of talk about like the plan for the next few years. And more specifically, I'm getting involved with some of the social media output. So
Nice.
Creating graphics and trying to build our platforms.
That's awesome. That's really cool. With the Chromatic Brass Collective, I know I didn't send you a question about that, but did you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's like such an important group as well. And I feel like this is a good platform to share.
CBC is really great. My first introduction to them was I did actually see them at IWBC in 2022 and then ended up playing with them in a couple of years later. We did a residency at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and CBC is designed to be a space for women of color in brass. It's a very empowering space. And I think that both Athena and CBC have been super foundational, just sort of environments for me to be in. I've enjoyed getting to meet and connect with musicians from all over and, meeting people who, have sort of paved the way for me to be able to do what I want to do and our generation to be able to do what we want to do.
Of course. Of course. How do you find it is like making new connections in those places when you go into the group for the first time? Or
Yeah, for sure. It's always hard, navigating, traveling to a new place. Maybe you don't know anybody, maybe you only know a couple of people. But I think, just being yourself and also giving yourself like a chance to adjust, whether that's traveling and meeting up with Athena in whatever iteration that group is going to be at that time, or like moving across the country, for example. We live in a people first world, but also like a people like industry. And so the more that you can just sort of be yourself and be a good person, I think that it makes it easier to sort of navigate being in these new places.
definitely. Because you've moved a lot for school as well, right? Like you started on the East Coast. Well, you're from the Midwest, started on the East Coast, West
Yeah.
Coast, and now another place in the West Coast.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like it's like kind of starting over at every place, or how do you approach that?
That's a really good question. I think that in some ways it can feel like you're starting over, but I think if you can approach it and ground yourself in like the experiences you've had before, it doesn't have to feel that scary. Because I think, the notions of starting over, it's like, okay, I'm going to join a new studio, I'm going to meet a bunch of new people, but I've met new people before. I know how to navigate like being a new student in a new area. And it takes, some time to get used to of, the processes that every institution has and, where to ask the questions you might have. But I think in general, just trying to remind myself that I do have the skills and I have the experience and it's okay. The adjustment period will happen and it's okay.
Right. And like I feel like we're so busy as musicians, but also as students, like our schedules are so crazy busy and it's so hard like keeping up with people that we've met at our last place and now we're in a new place.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to like keep the communication there. What kind of advice do you have for maybe other students that are going through like a similar thing?
Yeah. I think don't be afraid to like hit that call button. Like there are people that I haven't seen in person in several years, but I am in frequent communication with them via text or phone call. And it can be hard to, leave your people and leave your communities and leave the places that feel like home. But we are really lucky to live in a day where it's so easy to stay in communication with people and to feel like those people are part of your new adventure.
Definitely. It's good advice. You're such a wise young lady.
Thank you.
Of course. So you touched a little bit before on like the idea of imposter syndrome. We talked about anxiety a little bit. Have you dealt a lot with imposter syndrome like in your own career?
For sure. I think that, performance anxiety, imposter syndrome are things that feel really like individual and isolating. And it often feels like, oh my gosh, no one else feels like this. But the truth is that like most people that you talk to have experiences with performance anxiety, nerves, imposter syndrome. And I think, one of the things that's helped me the most is like being willing to talk about it with friends and my studio and teachers. And that has helped me not feel so alone. But I think, something else that I did is I listened to this TED talk about imposter syndrome, and it talked about how sort of working through it involves like being able to catch like your patterns of negative self-talk, like when those thoughts start to creep in, how they start to creep in. And I think that for me, like I had to sort of sit with that for a little bit, but being willing to talk about imposter syndrome with friends was a way for me to hold myself accountable. And I think that like in turn, I've had friends who have also helped me hold myself accountable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very fair. I guess, sometimes we're maybe like in the summer when we're not seeing people as often, or just in times where it's also just hard to like slow down and like take that time to reflect. Talking to friends is really great. What other ways do you think, like how do you slow down? How do you take that time to sit with yourself and reflect?
Yeah, I think I agree. Like my, weekly day to day is pretty jam packed. And I think that I've tried to be way more mindful of getting out of the music building, whether it's like I have 10 minutes and I need to eat lunch, I'm going to go outside and do that. Or I have 15 minutes, I'm going to go for a quick walk around campus. And sometimes just sort of getting outside and taking a deep breath is enough to sort of get yourself to settle down. I also am a big like walker and hiker and runner. And so trying to find times and deliberate times of the day to work those things in. I often will walk to school. I am fortunate to live within walking distance, but doing things to prioritize like keeping myself grounded has been really helpful. And I think is really important, particularly in this stage of life.
Sure. Were you always like good at doing that, or is that something that's kind of happened as you've gotten older?
I think it's something that I'm way more conscious of right now. And I think that being willing to prioritize that is hard, but there are times where I get really frustrated in the practice room, or maybe like I've gone straight through from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. And I've just tried to be better about giving myself grace. Like, it's okay. Like, you can take this hour to decompress, to go outside, to take care of yourself. And I think that the more that I've done that and the more that I've seen how that has benefited me, the easier it is for me to to remember to do that daily.
Right. I think that's really important, like giving yourself grace and having the space to do that. I feel like, especially in the undergrad area, like the mindset is so like, oh, I didn't have time to eat today. I didn't have time to sleep. And like, it's almost this like, it feels like this like brag in a way where people are like proud of themselves that they haven't taken care of themselves. So I think it's like, yeah, I agree. It's really important to give yourself that opportunity. And
for sure. I think also like I am pretty good about like packing my lunch. And sometimes, right before I go to bed, like the last thing I want to do is like pack my lunch for the next day. But in reality, it takes all of 5 minutes. And then like the next day I'm good to go and I have what I need. And so sometimes for me, like you can do anything for 10 minutes, right? Like, yeah, just go pack your lunch. It's not going to take that long and you're going to thank yourself tomorrow.
Right. 100%. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I guess talking about the younger undergrad, maybe even master's students, what is like something that you really struggled with, like back in the day? Like, what is something that was hard to prioritize, or just like a feeling maybe that you really had to work hard to overcome?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of just sort of like pressure, not necessarily from any one or any, group of people, but like as you're sort of building your experience, there's a lot of pressure to say yes. And I know that like sometimes our schedules are just busy and we don't have the opportunity to say no or to configure our schedules in a way that maybe gives us the break that we really want or need. But I do think that something that really helped me is if I'm asked to play on a friend's recital or I'm asked to add something, I've started leading with, yes, I'm very interested. Can I get back to you? And maybe it's like, can I get back to you in an hour? Can I get back to you tomorrow? Like, let me check my schedule, because sometimes the excitement of the opportunity will just sort of like shine brighter than like the thought of, do I have time to do this? Can I dedicate the time needed for me to be a good, ensemble member or a good duet partner, something like that. So giving yourself time to think is really important.
Absolutely. And when Tom was on the podcast, he was talking about like how it's so important when you're a student to like be a little selfish, like be selfish with your time and like actually focus on like what's best for you and like what you might need. And I totally agree that just like slowing down and like waiting a minute, because it does get so exciting. And I feel like that's such a common like thought process for younger students, is just like, oh, I don't want to miss this opportunity, or like, this sounds so fun, like I must do it. And then the next thing you know, our Google Calendar is like a solid block of color, and like we don't have any time again to take care of ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed. And I think like using some sort of calendar process, whether it's like something that you're handwriting in, or I use Google Calendar a ton, like having a visual representation of like, okay, I want to do this. How is it going to fit into my day? And like seeing the different blocks of time just like visually can be kind of eye-opening to whether or not you do have the time, even if you want to do something.
Definitely. Did you have a point in undergrad where it felt like there was almost like a wall where like you couldn't keep going, or like you didn't want to like finish your degree? I feel like again, just with that like busyness and stuff, sometimes there's just this like force, it almost feels like, where you're like, I don't know how to deal.
Not in undergrad. I think I've always been very sort of like school driven, even in like the busiest of times. And I'm really thankful that I haven't sort of experienced that burnout. I will say my biggest piece of advice to anyone going into, college for music is to have something separate from music. And that's not necessarily just like a hobby, but I have minors, and I was able to do my music degree and do it the way that I wanted to, and have other outlets outside of music completely unrelated to music that were really, really helpful, particularly in those times of burnout or like I'm really exhausted. And I feel like being in music school can be really difficult because we go from having music as an outlet, and then we suddenly forget that music can still be an outlet. So having things completely separate from music, having hobbies, and also just like reminding yourself to play for fun. I often will just, after a really stressful recording session, I'll pull out an etude that I really love, or a section of a piece that makes me feel really connected to my instrument and what I'm doing, to remind myself that there's a reason why I chose to go into music and a reason why I'm still here.
Right. Definitely. I remember when you were doing your DMA auditions, you were talking about your pre-audition routine, I guess, for like
yeah.
Yeah. Do you still listen to fun music before you go into something?
I do. I think that, part of my pre-audition, pre-competition routine has always been sort of grounded in like some kind of structure. And I sort of know like how I want to warm up and like what I need to get myself centered like on the trumpet. But I've realized in the last few years that I also just need to smile. And so I do listen to fun music. I listen to upbeat music. Disney music is often something that I will put on just to like remind myself to like sort of shake out the nerves, and that like I want to be here. And what I'm doing is something that makes me happy. And I know everyone sort of has different things that they need to sort of channel that kind of focus. But yeah, for me, just laughing or smiling with friends. I know before one of the competitions I did over the summer, I got really nervous, and I found a friend in the hallway and I was like, I need you to come in here and dance with me. Like, I need to shake out the nerves. I need to laugh. And I felt so much better after.
That's awesome. I think that's the coolest thing. Like, yeah, it's so important to like know what works for you, and that's such a fun thing that works for you. Yeah. I wish I could do it too. Something we haven't really touched on yet was, so you are a grad assistant with the athletic bands at CU Boulder, and then you're also going to be working with the Music City Drum Corps.
Yeah.
How long have you been like an active member of like marching band, that whole world?
Yeah. So I marched all throughout high school, and we could join in middle school. So I did my 8th grade year too. And then I marched 1 year in college marching band, and marching band has always been something that's been really special to me. And it's been really fun to get involved on the other side. At CU, I absolutely love working with the marching band, the staff, the students. It's extremely fulfilling and fun. And now working with Music City and Tennessee has been great. DCI is not something that I've ever done. And so it's been really cool to experience that, organization and that activity as a teacher, and being able to work with students and teach trumpet, can't complain too much.
For sure. With the with like your graduate assistantship, you're teaching trumpet, but then you're also conducting. And what, like, what do you find are similarities between how you prepare for conducting and like how you prepare for playing trumpet? Is there a lot of crossover or?
Yeah, honestly, I think that I approach things from a listening foundation first and doing like the research needed. Like, what is this piece about? You do that when you're working on excerpts, when you're preparing something. A lot of the conducting that I'm doing with the athletic bands is like pep band stuff. So it's pop tunes and like
That's
crowd
fun.
pleasers. But I do think like in the same ways that like we have to practice starting notes, you have to practice like counting off various songs. And the more that you practice, the more sort of secure you feel when you actually have to do it. Um, Last year I had the opportunity to work with one of our non-major concert bands, and that was
Cool.
really, really fun and really rewarding. But I remember before the first rehearsal, I was super nervous because I did not student teach. I had never stood in front of a whole ensemble. And so it was going to be the first time I was ever doing that. And I remember just kind of sitting there and thinking, trying to get myself in the zone. And the thing that grounded me the most was reminding myself that I might not have podium experience, but I have experience teaching. I've taught private lessons, I've taught sectionals, and maybe it's going to be to a different degree, but I know how to use my ears and how to respond to something. And so
For sure.
That's been really helpful this last year, doing things that are seemingly not related to trumpet, but actually are quite connected.
Yeah, definitely. Is that something that you're hoping to like grow with and like incorporate into your career like post school?
Definitely open to it. I think one of the things that has been like the biggest takeaway is like the leadership aspect of being a performer. And I know that like at USC, during Honesty's Day, I still reference Honesty Day for what it's worth. I talked about how leadership for me is really interesting because if I'm involved in a student organization, I feel a different amount of confidence being a leader than I do sometimes when the trumpet's in my hand. And I think that when you are on the podium, you are a leader. Like, and you are teaching a piece, you're teaching how you think it should go, right? And I think that those experiences have helped me sort of hone in the leadership when I'm sitting in a section.
Sure. Yeah. I can imagine like the type of confidence it would instill as well. Just like knowing like you're in charge, you got to make the choices. Like no one's doing it for you kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what are your goals career-wise? Like ideal future, what is Amy going to be doing in like 10 years from now?
I've always been really interested in the military band path. I really love wind band playing and that style of music. So that's hopefully where I'll be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you think you're like always going to be teaching as well and doing that kind of thing? Yeah.
For sure. I really love working with all of the students that I get to teach in sort of larger groups and also like in private lessons. And so I hope to also be teaching privately.
Amazing. Do you have any last pieces of advice? You've given so much advice, and I think it's going to be really helpful for all the folks listening out there. So do you have any last things to add?
Yeah, my two biggest pieces of advice. The first one is to ask questions and, ask questions in your classes, with your teachers, with your friends, reach out to old mentors. Like everyone is like rooting for you. They want you to be successful and they're also always willing to chat and answer your questions. And the last thing is the growth mindset. And I've come a long way with sort of what this means to me. And I think as I was growing up, my parents did a really great job of approaching things with my brother and I. Anytime something would happen, the first question was, what did you learn? And recently I've been able to reflect on how that's helped me musically. And I think that, oftentimes we see competitions as measures of success. And obviously, right, when you have a ranking system or a placement that comes with some parts of that, there is a measure of success. But if you can approach what you take away from things that are maybe, society would deem as successful, and the same way that you would take away things that society would deem unsuccessful. And you can look at both of those and think about what you've learned, what you've, how you've grown, and still be proud of the work that you've put in. I think for me, that's been really helpful this past year. I've, competed in several things in this last year and have had a wide variety of outcomes. And being able to walk away from all of those with something that I'm proud of and something that I've learned and direction for how to keep going has helped me use all of those experiences to sort of build me up and not view some of them as, oh, this was really good and this wasn't so good, because ultimately they're all part of my journey and the path that I'm on.
100%, 100%. Thank you so much. I think you are just such an awesome and inspiring person. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing all of this with everyone. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone listening appreciates it as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have had this opportunity.
Of course. And thank you everyone for listening. Tune in next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the International Trumpet Guild podcast. The mission of the International Trumpet Guild is to promote communications among trumpet players around the world and to improve the artistic level of performance, teaching, and literature associated with the trumpet. We hope you will consider becoming a member at trumpetguild.org. For more information about the International Trumpet Guild podcast or to make suggestions for a future episode, please contact podcast@trumpetguild.org.